And first up for you at 5:30, there is a giant tug-of-war playing out over the fate of Central Connecticut State University. Your reporter Roger Suzanne joins us now live with more on both sides of the debate and why the stakes are so high here. Roger.
Yes, Stephanie, there certainly are many people who we know are very incredibly passionate about CCSU. And right now they're all faced with a big question. Should the university stay on its current path or take a major turn and really shift its direction? Central Connecticut State University has a proud history, the first public university in the state and still the most affordable. But the fate of the school's future is uncertain because of a bold, controversial plan.
I understand fear. I have fear as well because it's change.
CCSU President Zulma Toro, who wore sunglasses during our interview because of an allergic reaction, plans to transition Central into Connecticut's first polytechnic institution.
We need to differentiate ourselves from other universities, not only in the state of Connecticut, but beyond.
So what is a polytechnic school? President Zulma says CCSU would emphasize STEM programs, AI, and experiential learning like internships to help students acquire skills employers are looking for.
This type of institution provides every student, no matter what discipline they graduated from, the opportunity to have experience at the time of graduation.
That doesn't sound so bad, right? But critics like Tim Scott, a professor of social work at CCSU, believe that becoming a polytechnic school would take the university down the wrong path and betray Central's history.
So you're looking at bringing in destroying this public university, a storied public institution here in Connecticut, to be able to essentially privatize its interests.
Scott, who has written about what he calls the big tech takeover of schooling, argues teaching kids to sync their skills with what large companies want is a bad strategy because those needs can shift as quickly as technology.
If you're paying attention, and like a lot of people are, including myself, is that these jobs that, especially at an R2 polytechnic university in the region, those jobs are highly susceptible to automation themselves.
Hundreds of people signed an online petition against the proposal. Senior Caroline Killian worries the transition would make CCSU more expensive and lead to less resources for programs outside of STEM curriculum.
There's only a small portion of the many students across many departments at this university whose job chances would actually be improved under this new model.
President Toro argues that's not true, and that even as a polytechnic school, CCSU would remain affordable. And despite her critics' skepticism, leaders would not cut or trim any programs, including liberal arts. And some students, like Madison Smith, support the idea.
I think it could be a really good idea. I think it'd open up a lot of opportunities for a wide variety of students, and it would offer a lot of hands-on opportunities as well.
The Board of Regents would ultimately have to approve the plan, but President Toro wants to move fast. If everything goes smoothly, the board could greenlight the plan by this summer, and CCSU could become a polytechnic university by the fall of 2027. For better?
By doing this, everybody will be winning.
Or worse.
This is a ruinous plan for this storied public university.
And by the way, right now, President Toro is hosting public forums to discuss these plans with students as well as faculty members. She hopes that these conversations help people feel more confident about CCSU's future, whether they become a polytechnic school or not. Roger Suzanne in Channel 3 Eyewitness News. Mark, I'll send it over to you.